Next segment, Governor. A governor at work. You take office in January 2004. Next August, Hurricane Katrina hits. You come out of that catastrophe one of the few office holders in the entire country whose poll standings are enhanced. How'd you pull that off?
The people of Mississippi are strong, reliable, resilient, self-reliant people. When people looked at what happened on the TV, they probably couldn't tell that Mississippi bore the brunt of the hurricane. New Orleans had a terrible tragedy, but it was a rising water flood after the fact their levees broke. It was a terrible thing. My coastline was obliterated. We had about 70,000 homes statewide that were uninhabitable. Hurricane force winds 240 miles north. A third of the fatalities in our state weren't on the coast. It was more than a coastal calamity. Yet our people got up the next day, been knocked flat, and they hitched up their britches and went to work. And they not only went to work helping themselves, they went to work helping their neighbors. And that was so critical. Our people came back to their communities. We got the schools open. Every public school in Mississippi was open before any public school in New Orleans. People had to have a place for the kids to go to school. The employers, except for the casino industry, the big employers all back open in the 4 months left in the year. The casinos had to float under state law. Well, they've been wanting to come on land for years. Well, a bunch of them came on land. Those big barges just ended up 2 or 3 blocks inland and ran over buildings. But at any rate, that's why they were later coming back. But jobs, schools, and then housing. We had at one point 47,000 temporary FEMA trailers for people to live in Mississippi. But we got it done pretty dang fast, and people came home. You saw, if you watched TV then, Mississippi wasn't home 10% of the time, but you could see Mississippians aren't into victimhood. They weren't looking for somebody to blame. They're just doing what they had to do.
More recent catastrophe, the oil leak. Thousands of barrels a day for 80 days. The Obama administration could have, there are a lot of things they could have. They could have waived the Jones Act. They could have permitted Louisiana to dredge up sand berms the way Governor Jindal asked them for permission. They could have waived EPA regulations and would have made it easier to skim the oil. And above all, they could have refrained from imposing a moratorium on deep water drilling that shut down a lot of jobs. You, a governor of a state right there on the Gulf, would not attack the Obama administration. How come?
If you've been through an unprecedented disaster like we went through with Katrina, and you recognize that the BP oil spill was unprecedented. We've had more than 30,000 oil wells in the last 50 years drilled in the Gulf of Mexico, and nothing like this has ever happened. So it was an unprecedented, unforeseen disaster. And yeah, the administration was slow on the uptake. And some of the planning that had been done in previous years, going back to Exxon Valdez, turned out not to be very applicable. But I'm very reluctant to criticize somebody for an imperfect response, because I've seen when you get hit by the worst natural disaster in American history, anybody that thinks everything's going to go according to oil just doesn't know what they're talking about.
You get elected governor. You're facing a $720 million deficit. That's about, 13, 14% of the budget?
Today it is. Back then it was about 20%.
20% of the budget. Both houses of your legislature are in the hands of the Democrats. You got rid of that deficit without raising taxes. How'd you do that? And how you work with across the aisle there? Is it because your Democrats back home are such conservative folks that you really share fundamental values in common? How does that work in Mississippi?
There was a time when our legislature was almost nonpartisan. But the House today is very much more partisan, 72 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and the House is much more partisan. However, there are some conservative Democrats, and finally, we took the message to the public. Do you want a tax increase, or do you want to get control of spending? And by about 75 to 15, the public says we ought to control spending rather than raise taxes. And they're right. as I said about the federal government, our problem wasn't that we were taxing too little. We just got to spending too much, and we controlled it. The other thing, very importantly, we grew the economy. If you want your revenue to go up, don't raise tax rates. Get more taxpayers with more taxable income. That's what's going to be wrong with Obama here if they let the Bush tax cuts or some of the Bush tax cuts expire. They're going to see that that doesn't increase revenue. It's going to cost revenue. Get more people working. Then your revenue goes up.
Final segment here. I've got to get you out of this studio pretty quickly, so let me move quickly through this. The man from Dixie. Throughout your years in Washington, Reagan White House, you worked for George H.W. Bush, you served as chairman of the RNC, you opened a lobbying firm. You flew back home to Yazoo City every weekend you could. Your wife stayed in Yazoo City to raise your two kids, as I recall, two boys. Why'd you do that? Why didn't you buy a big townhouse in Georgetown or one of those big places over in McLean?
It started, I was only going to stay at the White House for 2 years, and our younger son was going to be in the first grade. And we just thought it would be very dislocating to take him up there, go to the first grade, half of the second grade, turn and go back. We like where we live, and we're comfortable there. Both my boys graduated from high school in Yazoo City, Mississippi, because we chose to and because I could. As time went on, we thought about, particularly after both the boys finished high school, but about then, I was starting to think about the future, and at any rate, it worked for us. And Marcia says we've been married 39 years and we've been together 12.
All right.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
So you keep your home in Yazoo City, even when you're working in Washington. You go home, you get elected governor. You and I have known each other for a long time. Let me tell you what I've been hearing for the last year or 18 months from a lot of folks who are our friends. And it runs like this. Haley Barbour may be the most talented man in the Republican Party. He's good at politics. He's good with people. He's right on all the issues. He has a talent for raising money. But how can the governor of Mississippi, a man who is so much a man of the South, attract enough support in the Northeast and the Pacific Northwest and the Upper Midwest to become president, even though so many of us would love to see him make a run for it? As a professional, how do you analyze your own prospects?
Well, first of all, I'm a long way from deciding to run for president. I'm not going to give it any thought till after November. My focus is on November 2nd. We can't wait till 2012 to start taking our country back. This is the election that matters. But I will give it some thought after November. And I'm sure Jimmy Carter from Georgia and Bill Clinton from Arkansas had to ask that same question. And I can tell you, I suspect, neither one of them knew what the answer was when they decided to run for president. And if I decide to run for president, I won't know what the answer is either. But I will know this. If I run for president, what you see is what you get. And, you know, I am from Mississippi. I do have a Southern accent. I was a lobbyist and a pretty damn good one. And I'm very proud, as we were talking before the show came on. I am happy about my life. I got a great marriage. I got great family, and I've had a great career. Wouldn't do anything differently. And I will tell you this: the next president of the United States on January 21st, 2013, is going to start lobbying. He's going to be lobbying Congress. He's going to be lobbying other countries. He's going to be lobbying the business community. He's going to be lobbying the labor unions and the governors, because that's what presidents do. And I feel like it's an advantage for me to have had the chance to do that. As far as Southern accent and Mississippi, the country may be looking for the anti-Obama in 2012. Don't know. Could be.
Haley Reeves Barbour, 63rd Governor of the great state of Mississippi. Thank you. I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thanks for joining us.